3:47 a.m. February 19th, 2026. An industrial park off Sugarloaf Parkway in Lawrenceville, Georgia. 41 federal agents moved in 3 columns across the parking lot of Unit 14B. Secret Service Financial Crimes. Postal Inspection Service. Georgia Bureau of Investigation Tactical Support. Breach charges were already placed on the rear loading door. The lead agent's earpiece clicked twice. Inside the unit, 7 workstations were still running. 7 operators were still seated. A commercial check printer was halfway through a batch of 400 fraudulent instruments destined for a USPS routing facility in Duluth at 6 a.m. The charges went. The door came off its track. The first operator raised her hands before the flashbangs finished echoing. On the primary monitor, a signature was being rendered in real time. A signature belonging to a 74-year-old retiree in Sacramento who had never heard of Unit 14B. The software was mid-stroke when agents pulled the power. 18 months, 1,200 banks, $340 million drained from accounts belonging to Americans who had never written the checks that emptied them. The Secret Service called it Operation Autograph. The pattern first surfaced in early September 2025. A regional bank in Tulsa flagged 6 checks that had cleared against the account of a dead customer. The customer had died in March. The checks were dated August. The signatures matched his driver's license, his last will, and his 2019 tax return so closely that the bank's forensic examiner needed a stereo microscope to find the discrepancies. There were no discrepancies. The bank absorbed the loss. $41,200. A rounding error in a quarterly write-down. The file went into a folder labeled Unresolved and stayed there. By October, 17 more banks had filed similar reports to the American Bankers Association Fraud Clearinghouse. By early November, the number was 63. By the first week of December, the Secret Service Financial Crimes Division had opened a formal case file. The working title was Flat and Bureaucratic, Matter 2025-FC-4471. The initial lead agent was Special Agent Rachel Ngozi, 14 years in financial crimes, previously assigned to the 2023 counterfeit currency takedown in Newark. She was handed a spreadsheet of 1,200 affected institutions on December 11, 2025. By December 14th, she had the first technical signature. Every fraudulent check carried an identical microanomaly in the signature downstroke, a 0.04 millimeter compression artifact invisible to the naked eye, invisible to bank scanners, invisible to every existing forgery detection protocol, visible only under 400 times magnification. It was a rendering signature, the kind left by a generative model. Someone had trained an AI on real American signatures and was printing the output onto blank check stock. Ngozi pulled a second spreadsheet. Victim names, cross-referenced against public records databases, property deeds, court filings, marriage licenses, driver's license renewals in 12 states that published partial images online for voter verification. Every single victim had at least one signature sample sitting in a public database. 140,000 Americans. That was the size of the training set based on extrapolation from seized samples. The ring wasn't generating signatures from imagination. It was cloning real ones from documents that the victims themselves had unknowingly made public. The entry point to the ring came on January 8, 2026. A bank in Macon, Georgia, called the Secret Service Field Office with something unusual. A check for $18,400 had cleared against a local dentist's account. The dentist had written the check. She just hadn't written it to the payee listed. The payee was a Shell LLC, registered in Delaware. The LLC's registered agent address traced to a mail forwarding service in Atlanta. The forwarding service's logs traced to a pickup pattern. Every Tuesday and Friday, same vehicle, same driver. A gray 2019 Toyota Camry, registered to a 29-year-old woman in Gwinnett County. Her name was Danielle Okafor, former bank teller, 3 years at a regional credit union branch in Duluth. Resigned in May 2024, citing personal reasons. She was now the CEO of Nothing on Paper and the director of a ring that had drained more money than most violent organized crime operations generate in a decade. Surveillance went up on January 12th. 3 teams, rotating coverage. The Camry made the same trip 6 days a week, from a 2-bedroom apartment in Sugar Hill to Unit 14B in Lawrenceville. 47 minutes each way. She arrived at 8:30 a.m. and left at 7 p.m. weekends. She was seen at a Kroger, a gym, and her mother's house. No visible associates outside the unit. The unit was the problem. It sat in the middle of a 200-unit industrial park. Warehouses, HVAC contractors, auto body shops, a taekwondo studio. Legitimate businesses in every direction. A raid without an interior map was a raid that could end in a hostage situation, a fire, or a destroyed evidence cache. I spent days going through the surveillance logs from that month, and one detail kept nagging me. The unit never had visitors. Not one. 7 operators worked inside, but nobody arrived and nobody left except Okafor. For 3 weeks of continuous observation, the other 6 humans inside that unit never entered or exited. They were living there. Agents found cots in the second phase of the investigation, personal effects, a rice cooker, a laundry rotation. The operators had been on site for months, paid in cash, running 12-hour shifts on signature generation. 4 of the 7 were Okafor's cousins. 2 were former classmates from her high school in Decatur. 1 was her fiancé. It was a family operation in the most literal sense. The first obstacle came on January 24th. A postal inspector named Gerald Pham flagged the file for interagency review and recommended against immediate enforcement action. Pham's concern was operational. The ring was using a single USPS routing facility in Duluth to mail its checks. Volumes were calibrated precisely to avoid triggering bulk mail flags. 50 to 75 envelopes per drop, 6 days a week, distributed across 4 different postal worker routes. If the Secret Service moved before the postal side of the chain was mapped, any prosecution would collapse on the mail fraud charges. And mail fraud carried the longest sentencing exposure. Ngozi pushed back. The ring was producing 400 checks a day. Every day of delay meant more victims. Pham held firm. His superiors held firm. The interagency working group froze for 11 days. On February 4th, the logjam broke. Pham's office identified a single supervisor at the Duluth routing facility who had been diverting the ring's outgoing mail around the standard screening protocols. He had been paid $3,200 per month in cash for 18 months. His wife had been battling stage 3 ovarian cancer. The medical bills had reached $180,000. He was arrested quietly on February 9th. He cooperated immediately. The ring had 72 hours before its next scheduled mail drop. The Secret Service had 72 hours to build a breach plan. Ngozi was in the command trailer at 9 p.m. on February 18th when her phone rang. It was Pham. The original supervisor had just called his handler at the routing facility. A substitute supervisor had been assigned for the morning shift of February 19th. The substitute was not compromised. If the ring's mail drop went out at 6 a.m. as scheduled, the new supervisor would almost certainly flag the volume and trigger an internal USPS investigation, which would tip the ring within hours. The raid moved up 7 hours earlier than planned. Tactical teams that had expected to stage at noon were now being told to be at the perimeter by 3 a.m. The interior floor plan that Pham's team had reconstructed from a 2019 county inspection was 12 hours from final verification. It would have to go without the last walkthrough. At 2:51 a.m., the final column moved into position. By 3:47, the breach was green. The takedown itself lasted 4 minutes and 11 seconds. No shots fired, no injuries. All 7 operators were removed from the unit in zip ties. Okafor was not present. She had left at 11 p.m. the previous night and had not returned. A secondary team hit her apartment in Sugar Hill at the same moment the unit breach went. She was asleep. She surrendered at her front door. The unit itself was a catalog of industrial-scale fraud. 14 commercial check printers, 60,000 blank check templates sourced from a wholesale supplier in Shenzhen, 4 high-resolution document scanners, 3 commercial-grade laminators for processing counterfeit driver's licenses used to open holding accounts, a server rack running 6 GPU workstations, and a single Samsung T7 portable hard drive, 2 terabytes containing the signature generation models for 140,000 individual Americans. The drive had been sitting on a desk next to a half-eaten sandwich. It was not encrypted, it was not password protected. The sloppiness of it surprised even the forensic examiners. If you've ever wondered how an operation of this scale stays invisible for 18 months, the answer is banal. It stays invisible because each individual loss is small and because banks would rather eat the fraud than report the systemic failure. A single check for $18,400 is a write-off. 400 checks a day averaging $2,300 each across 547 days is $340 million. The bureaucracy of the absorption is what allowed the bureaucracy of the theft to thrive. The detail that surprised investigators was the architecture of the training set. Okafor did not steal signatures in real time. She had scraped them during her 3 years as a bank teller, photographing the signature lines on deposit slips, loan applications, and notarized documents on her lunch breaks. She had stored the samples in an encrypted folder on her personal cloud drive. When she resigned in May 2024, she walked out with approximately 4,800 high-resolution signature samples representing customers at her branch. The other 135,200 signatures in the training set came from public records, property deeds in 14 states, small claims court filings, lobbying disclosure forms, the kind of documents that get scanned and posted to county websites and never thought of again. Every person whose signature has ever appeared on a publicly recorded document was a potential target. The ring was not picking victims, it was scraping them. At Secret Service headquarters, nobody treated this as a one-off. This ring was the first, it would not be the last. The raid was over, the unit was secured, 23 evidence teams were processing the scene in rotating shifts. But the real question was just starting to be asked in the command trailer at 5:30 a.m. Who had trained the model? Danielle Okafor had a bachelor's degree in business administration from Georgia State. No computer science background, no machine learning coursework, no known technical collaborators in her immediate network. She had scraped the signature samples, she had run the operation, but she had not built the software that rendered the signatures. Someone else had. Someone the 7 operators had never met. Someone Okafor would not name in her February 20th proffer session. A forensic review of the Samsung T7 drive surfaced a second lead. The rendering model had been trained on a framework posted to a public GitHub repository in July 2024 by an anonymous account. The account had been deleted in December 2025. The repository was a fork of an open-source handwriting synthesis model originally developed for accessibility research at a university in the Netherlands. Someone had taken an academic tool and weaponized it. And then, before the Secret Service could ask who, they had disappeared. The cooperation negotiations began on February 22nd. Okafor was facing 47 counts: wire fraud, bank fraud, mail fraud, aggravated identity theft, conspiracy. The Department of Justice was preparing to seek a sentence in excess of 90 years. Her attorney asked for a proffer. She named 4 associates, her fiancé, 2 cousins, a high school friend. All 7 operators were already in custody. She did not name a 5th name. Here's what doesn't add up. A woman running a $340 million operation does not meet the person who built her core software on Discord. She does not find him through a classified ad. Somewhere between the university in the Netherlands and Unit 14B in Lawrenceville, there was a bridge. The Secret Service has not yet identified the bridge. FAM's team identified a secondary lead in the USPS data, a second mail pattern. Similar volumes, similar drop times, but routed through a different facility in Charlotte, North Carolina. The pattern started in October 2025 and was still active as of the February 19th raid. There was a second cell. The Charlotte unit was raided on March 6th. 4 operators, a different leadership structure. $47 million in documented losses over 5 months. The rendering software on the Charlotte cell's workstations was an identical build of the software seized in Lawrenceville. Same source, different distributor. Here is the take that will probably get us flack. The Secret Service has been executing this investigation with speed and precision, but the regulatory failure that allowed it to exist for 18 months belongs to the banking sector. 1,200 institutions absorbed losses without triggering a single coordinated alert. The American Bankers Association Fraud Clearinghouse existed. The protocol for flagging anomalies existed. The systems all existed. Every one of them was bypassed, not by the criminals, but by the internal preference of banks to keep fraud numbers quiet. If the first 6 affected banks had coordinated in September, the ring would have been dismantled before it reached 200 victims. It reached 140,000 instead, which raises the question we cannot stop asking. Would you have noticed in the monthly statement of your 82-year-old mother a check cleared for $2,300 to a Delaware LLC you've never heard of? Would you have called the bank? Would you have pushed past the first customer service agent who told you it was probably a subscription she forgot? 89% of the 140,000 victims had not yet been notified as of April 20th, 2026. The Secret Service Victim Notification Unit is processing names in batches of 500 per week. At that rate, the notification process will conclude in 2031. One detail that has stuck with investigators from the February 19th raid is what was playing on the monitor in the break area of Unit 14B, a cooking show, a daytime rerun. The volume was up. The 7 operators had been watching it while printing checks at a rate of 1 every 108 seconds. The domesticity of the scene is what most of the agents who were there remember. On April 9, 2026, Danielle Okafor pleaded guilty to 31 of the 47 counts in exchange for a cooperation agreement. Her sentencing is scheduled for July 2026. The United States Attorney for the Northern District of Georgia has indicated she will seek a sentence of not less than 35 years. She is 29 years old. She will be at least 64 when released. Of the $340 million drained from the 1,200 affected institutions, approximately $31 million has been recovered from seized accounts, shell LLCs, and a storage unit in Alpharetta containing $4.2 million in cash. The remaining $309 million is categorized as unrecoverable. A significant portion was laundered through cryptocurrency exchanges registered in jurisdictions that do not cooperate with U.S. subpoena enforcement. A smaller portion was routed through a used car wholesaling operation in New Jersey that has so far declined to produce records. The postal facility supervisor in Duluth was charged on March 14th with conspiracy to commit mail fraud. He cooperated fully. His sentence is expected to reflect the cooperation. His wife's cancer treatment continued through the Federal Health Exchange after his arrest. The operators from both cells have been charged individually. The Charlotte cell leader, a 34-year-old named Marcus Bowden, has not cooperated. He is being held without bail pending trial in October 2026. The builder of the rendering software has not been identified. The anonymous GitHub account has not been traced. The bridge between the Dutch University Research and Unit 14B remains open. 2 additional cells have been flagged for active investigation, one in Phoenix, one in Baltimore. Both are using the same rendering software. Neither has been localized to a physical address as of the most recent Secret Service briefing on April 22nd. The Samsung T7 hard drive containing the 140,000 signature models is in federal custody. It has been copied. The copies are under Level 4 access restriction at the Secret Service Cryptographic Evidence Facility in Beltsville, Maryland. The original drive will remain in evidence through the conclusion of all prosecutions, which are projected to run through 2029. The 140,000 Americans whose signatures are on that drive are not being notified of the existence of their signature models. The Secret Service has determined that public disclosure of the training set would create a secondary risk of replication. The victims will be told their financial information was compromised. They will not be told their signatures are now indefinitely reproducible by any actor who obtains a copy of the model. If you have a signature on file in a public record anywhere in the United States, there is no way to withdraw it. The document cannot be unpublished. The signature cannot be unsigned. Operation Autograph is classified as ongoing. The Lawrenceville cell is dismantled. The Charlotte cell is dismantled. The software exists. The training set exists. The demand for clean signatures on fraudulent checks exists. The ring is gone. The tool that built it is not.